The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody, REMI is very excited to host this guest webinar, Evidence-Based Economic Impacts for a Wind Farm Project, Developing Estimates Using Construction and Lifecycle Data, which is being presented by Jim Roby, the Principal of Roby Analytics, and Albert Youngaward, the Senior Development Manager at Apex Clean Energy. At REMI, we provide economic modeling solutions to help policymakers make more informed policy decisions. You can ask questions at any time in the question box, and if time permits, I'll ask you, Jim and Albert, these questions at the end. But if we run out of time, we'll make sure to reach out to everybody who asked a question individually. So again, we're very excited for this webinar, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Brian. It's a pleasure, and I'm now speaking for both Albert and me to present these data to you. I know a number of you most likely, and from my days at the Upjohn Institute, I retired about a year ago and have been pursuing individual projects like being able to work with Albert. So Albert, let me turn this over to you for lead us into this.
Okay, well, thank you, Jim, and yeah, thank you, Brian. I guess I should say thank you guys for the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit about the project that we had, Jim. So, kind of kick things off, I'm Albert Youngaward with Apex Clean Energy. We are I guess very safe to say we're a mission-driven renewable energy developer. We work with utility-scale projects, primarily wind, solar, battery storage, getting into a lot of greenfield technologies, and just trying to figure out as the country moves through this transition of the way in which we used to power our economy to whatever the future is going to look like. We're kind of on the leading edge, working with a lot of other well-respected developers across the country, trying to build these projects of the future. A lot of it is then significant rural economic development, given the nature of where these projects are built. And so that's what we'll kind of focus on here today, using some evidence-based data that went into to a study looking at an economic impact model for what a wind farm could do for a particular county in western Michigan. So just real quick, Apex Clean Energy, again, renewable energy developer, U.S.-based company headquartered in Charlottesville, Virginia. There's probably about, it says 300 up, excuse me, on my screen it says about 300 folks at the company, but we're upwards of 400 now, so growing quickly. Let's see some modification of my screen there. Sorry about that. And let's see on the slides. Are we moving here? There we go. Jim, you with me?
Looks good now.
It's all good.
Good. Yeah. So yeah, I'll say in terms of working with Jim Roby, as we go into a community, we start looking at what the potential positive economic impacts of these types of projects, of the renewable wind or solar project. There are significant economic benefits, so it's a challenge sometimes to figure out how best to really document that and how best to communicate what these projects could mean financially for a given community. So we were fortunate to be able to reach out to Jim Roby, while he was still with the Upjohn Institute, being that we were working in Michigan, in the Upjohn Institute being a Michigan-based, well-respected Michigan-based organization. We were really fortunate to be able to work with Jim, who kind of guided us for the first time ever in terms of how to use REMI to put forward a diverse and evidence-based economic impact model. And so that's where we'll kind of go with this presentation here today. So again, as we're looking at putting together the presentation, Montcalm Wind is the name of the wind project that this presentation was put together for. Montcalm Wind is estimated to be a 375 megawatt project. We anticipate that it would accompany, as we're working with the community, over 400 families. So there's a direct economic benefit to those participating families. But then to extrapolate beyond just the direct rent or landowner payments to the individual participating families, these projects generate a significant amount of tax revenue. They also lead to new jobs coming to any given community, and just the overall holistic picture of how those dollars are spent. It gets quite complex, but that was really a nice learning experience for us in working with Jim and figuring out how the REMI model can more accurately help communicate all the different inputs and shocks of the various systems as a result of a project like this. So Jim, I'm maybe about ready to turn it over to you.
Great. So we used a REMI model for this, not surprisingly, since we're doing a REMI webinar. The Upjohn Institute had a multi-regional model, and it was custom designed for this. So we were able to segregate Montcalm County from the rest of the counties in Michigan, from the rest of the U.S. And it allowed us to then, of course, do the analytics for Montcalm, all of Michigan. So it really addressed many of the stakeholders from the local to the statewide level. So looking at the next slide, why do we use REMI? Well, I've been using REMI for about 26 or 27 years at this point. You, of course, can see more about it. We've worked in Michigan with organizations such as the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and did some partnership work with Gabe Ehrlich, Don Grimes, who many of you know from University of Michigan. One of the reasons we were able to use REMI in this case is that Upjohn did have a model. The one that we used at that time was 2.4.3, and there were alternatives that were available. And Albert and company have used some of these. There's of course RIMS 2, which is a paper version. Implan, which is a kind of a hybrid of a spreadsheet IO model. And then the National Renewable Energy Labs had the JEDI model. It's something like Jobs Economic Development model, and it was available for free. REMI is, of course, not available for free, but REMI has many capabilities, including being able to do time series. When we were working on this project, it was originally able to forecast out through at least 2060, so it well met our decision for a 30-year event horizon. We had 1 year of build and 30 years of operations, which is, and Albert can speak to this better than me, life cycle. I like REMI because it's dynamic, and so it isn't just a simple IO model, but it works through using shocks. And it was funny, some of our partners in this, Albert, if you remember, didn't like the term shock, but it was really how we thought about it. But it does use an iterative approach to estimating impacts. And, as many of you know, as users, it establishes a baseline to the economy using data from the CBO, University of Michigan, and others. And then for the national economy, then also has a regional economy built in for each of the study regions. And so it really did work well with us. Turning back to Albert for a little bit more on Apex.
Yeah. So as we were wrapping our mind around what's the best way to try to communicate all this information to any new community that we may be going into, rather than just put pen to paper and try to do the math on what the projected tax revenues would be over the life of a project. REMI model, just given what Jim just explained, it kind of checked all the boxes for us and opened up some new ideas, new opportunities for us. So this was the first time that we'd embraced this model. Apex Clean Energy. As we were going through with a new project, we had the benefit of having just completed an equally sized project. We just finished construction on what we call the Isabella Wind project. It is Michigan's largest operating wind farm located in Isabella County, right in central Michigan, not too far from Montcalm County, where we're starting a new project. And so we're able to use a lot of the actual evidence-based pro formas from the construction and operations of that Isabella Wind project, so that the numbers and all the data points that we were able to put into REMI were evidence-based, based on the fact that we had just finished construction, again, on an equally sized project. So there's some slight differences that we accounted for in terms of the various turbine models, the community, the various the millage rates or the various tax rates that differentiate between individual townships. But again, all the data that we're able to use and plug into REMI, we felt quite strongly about. So we weren't really having to make up any of the numbers. So it took a lot of the guessing game out of this process. Okay, so I mentioned the Isabella Wind project was a 385 megawatt project. The project in question, the Montcalm Wind project, is a 375 megawatt project. So again, very comparable in size. The estimated cost about $463 million. And so again, all the data that we're able to plug into REMI was backed up by sound financial modeling and actual expense for the Isabella project. Jim, from your perspective, there's some points you'd like to add in terms of how, as the REMI user, how you found this information, how helpful it was to you.
Yeah, thanks. So many times, if you're all REMI modelers, we're often using estimates on estimates. And so using the Isabella experience, we're able to, for all the inputs, come as close as we could using pro formas to real life data for this project. A couple of things we do want to acknowledge, REMI's an annual model and no project ever starts on January 1 and ends on January 31. So we annualized it in many ways. We also acknowledge that we may have overestimated by combining everything into a 12-month period from the 18-month period. Some soft costs and other things were probably condensed. And so in some ways, our estimates may be slightly overestimated, but it really is combining those impacts into a shorter time frame. And also to acknowledge that even though this is evidence-based from the pro forma in Isabella, know that these costs and many things can change over the period between the time we did these estimates and the time that they actually go into the dirt.
Yeah, those are all good points, and we're seeing the cost change right now in real life. All of us are in our own individual lives with inflation, et cetera. So yeah, these are based on the numbers from the Isabella project. But you raise a good point. We have inputs from the construction period, and so when we break these projects down, there's the development phase, which we don't have an operating project. We're not in the process of building, but development phase is a kind of a minimal spend. Significant spend during construction with the parts, components, mobilizing of labor, et cetera, and then the operations phase. And so we really focused on the construction and operations phases for the REMI model here. And so during construction, again, based on the Isabella projects, we were able to calculate estimates for estimated impacts in Montcalm County, the rest of the state of Michigan, and then the rest of the United States. And so that would, again, have an impact on whether the labor was coming from other states, people actually working on the project. Where were they coming from? Michigan based, from outside the state of Michigan, from some other part of the country. Where were those dollars going to go at the end of the day? And also the parts, the components, all the other moving parts associated with construction. So that was a learning process for us working with Jim to make sure that we understood that REMI has the regional purchase coefficients, and so there was a number, again, different moving parts that REMI made possible that were helpful in the study. So we looked at the supply chain, and this is the data here comes from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, who it's a federal research lab that does a lot of investigation into the pros, cons, the economic benefits, all things related to renewable energy. And so that helps guide kind of investment, helps guide the industry as we're moving forward, make sure that we do our job the right way. Based on data coming from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, we do see that the supply chain for wind turbine components, it is a global supply chain, though we see a lot of the materials are being manufactured here domestically in the U.S. And so a lot of the European industries or foreign companies that really grew the industry have opened up operations and manufacturing operations here in the U.S. as our market has grown. Just one interesting point for consideration here. With the new IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act legislation that was passed recently in DC, there are additional incentives that we believe are really going to drive a lot more investment into the local manufacturing supply chain here. So these numbers are based on historic realities, but I think moving forward we're going to see an even heavier emphasis on the domestic supply chain, which is exciting. I think it should be exciting for everybody. So here's a quick map, again, based on some of the same data on where the supply chain comes from. So wind turbine components, of course, this is looking at where each of the blades, the towers, the nacelles, all the nuts and bolts, where each of those pieces might be coming from. And again, we anticipate that this map is going to become even more populated here in the coming years. Let's see. So for operations and maintenance, as I mentioned, the construction side, we just talked through some of the construction inputs. Operations and maintenance, we had to make some estimates, but yeah, year two. So we anticipate that the construction will last for a calendar year. So 1 year of construction, all the jobs, everything that goes into it. Year 2 through 31 is a 30-year operational life of the project, with the maintenance, with the estimated rent checks that we would pay to participate in landowners. And so we're looking at $115 million invested of new capital flowing into the community over the 30-year operational life of the project. And that's I guess obviously break it down, the annual average of $3.8 million a year. Again, caveats being that these are nominal values. The costs are bumpy. They will vary year to year. And then there's some things that are somewhat unpredictable, just in terms of the maintenance and the anticipated work on the turbines. So turbines, like all pieces of equipment, will require regular maintenance. It is kind of hard to predict some of the unexpected stuff, but we factored in average operational life of the turbine. What would that look like? So again, brought us up to an event horizon of $115 million over the 30-year operational life. And then another component of the payments to the landowners. And so if we're working with 400 families based on the private agreement that we structure in terms of an easement or a private contract between us, Apex Clean Energy, and the individual participating families, we anticipate that would result in about another $118 million coming into the community, averaged at just around $4 million a year. Same caveats apply, and we do have some price escalators in the easement. When we start talking about how easements are structured and what type of money is going to flow into a community, that's often a private agreement between participating landowners of the community and the developer themselves. But we feel our prices are competitive with other leaders in the industry. So these are very safe estimates, if not conservative estimates, on what we expect to come into the community.
Albert, do you mind if we go back to that slide for a second? I want to interject, and some of you will be coming to the REMI users meeting. Don Grimes at University of Michigan was very helpful in that last caveat, because we were trying to think about, and there's, at this point, an undetermined range, but some families will get small payments, some will get very large payments, which, is this treated as regular income or windfall profits? But Don Grimes from RSQ at U of M and I were talking about this, and he suggested using a variable in REMI I'd never used before, which is transfer payments from corporations. And so it's not treated as income necessarily, it's not treated as windfall, but it was a unique way to think about it. And to kind of key back to why REMI is so important, say, versus others, is, you can call folks up and we're kind of a network of people that rely on each other. And so this was very helpful in thinking about the proper way to model these payments to leaseholders and others. Thanks.
Yeah, no, of course. And I'll let you take the reins with this one here, Jim.
Okay, so this was really new for us. We hadn't thought about this. Normally, we look at the impact of public sector employment as a as an outcome of REMI rather than as an input to REMI. Again, over that 30-year event horizons based on Isabella County experience, Brian O'Shea, one of the partners that we worked with and one of Albert's colleagues at Apex, estimated the impacts of payments to state and local governments, and we'll show you those in just a moment. But over this period, it's about $80 million for all kinds of local taxes and special districts. Annualized was about $2.66 million each year that went into the economy, and this was based on personal property taxes in the county due to the project. It's important to remember that some of this is industrial personal property, the part that generates the energy, and then the transmission part becomes utility personal property in Michigan. Some of the trick of this was what those depreciation schedules and other things look like were a moving target, and I think drove Brian a little crazy in this project. Again, we used all nominal dollars. We estimated expenditures used an average rate for townships rather than a specific site rate, because the actual locations weren't completely determined. We assumed a steady state for sources and millages. We don't know which ones will be renewed, what'll go up, what'll go down. And so this is that confidence interval thing. Certainly as you get out 30 years, some of these estimates, the interval gets a little bit wide. And all payments are based on current, and as of that moment, and it was a moving target in Michigan for depreciation schedules that then would allow for the tax incidence. So.
So this is a graph version, a little more visually appealing, perhaps, to some. Kind of breaking down a lot of the tax payments that Jim was just talking about. So we can see on the left-hand side of the graph, the money for schools is significant. And so from my perspective as renewable energy developers, we're going out into these communities. These types of projects, the Montcalm Wind project clearly fits the mold here, but these types of projects are often, if not the largest, some of the largest taxpayers that the given community has ever seen, may ever see. And that's certainly the case in Montcalm County. And so when we talk about rural economic development, for anyone who's working in the economic development space, you know that there's certain challenges that are posed for trying to attract industry, create jobs, or bring investment into rural communities. And sometimes it's based on infrastructure or other types of needs. But for a wind energy project, for a utility scale solar project, it's just such a nice fit. Again, from my perspective, that these projects come in, they don't require local communities to make significant investments. And we're not asking for tax abatements. You're not coming in. We don't need you to build new roads or build out sewer, or increase fire and rescue. We're not putting a lot more trucks on the road from a traffic congestion standpoint. We're building infrastructure that's going to sit there and spin and generate electricity and pay significant taxes, which really, especially in the state of Michigan, goes to help out the rural school systems, the individual, whatever assessed millage may be on the books at a county level or a local level. These projects pay their taxes starting year one. So again, some of the breakdown of the numbers.
Okay. Is this where I start, Albert?
Yeah, feel free to run.
As you can tell, we haven't rehearsed this significantly. So in the end of this is kind of a but for, and I think that's really important. Something Albert just said is, but for this project, many of these revenues would not have come to get a nearly $500 million worth of investment in Montcalm County, which is a beautiful rural county with no incentives, would be an interesting thing to do. So in the end, about 463 million, that was a few years ago, as Albert said, it's probably increased. in construction, 115 million in new dollars in operations and maintenance, 118 in payments to leaseholders. So those are families and landowners in Montcalm County, and to local units of government, about $80 million. So the total investment is about $750 million across the entire span. Those are in nominal dollars. So, we haven't done anything with discounting or inflating them. Those are just current estimates of the way it looks going forward. So we'll skip over these. You all know the measures, jobs, and Albert, feel free to go to the next one. The things that we looked at were jobs, output, GDP, and personal income. And that electeds, appointeds, and staffers are interested in the jobs you're creating and the personal income changes. So going to the next slide, we really start to estimate. And again, we condensed everything into a single year. We estimated going into the dirt in 2024, a total of about 876 jobs, 813 in the private sector. Increased output in the county, and so this is the county estimates at $132 million, value added at $78 million, essentially rounding up, and personal income at about $47 million. It's important to remember too that based on this recent experience in Isabella County, and Albert talked about this earlier, we were able to do something interesting in REMI because there is not a plug and play component for construction of wind farms in REMI. We were actually able to break down the stuff that we thought was going to happen, the economic activity in Montcalm County, and maybe essentially make them direct rather than indirect inputs. And so in looking at this, and many times people who use other models are interested in the direct, indirect, and induced. That didn't work as well here for us because those jobs, those 876, were all three of those types of jobs. But we really looked at the supply chain, those supplying gravel, those supplying concrete and other things that were supplied locally. We shocked them directly in the model. And so it really was a bit of a different way to think about it than using, say, the NAREL JEDI model or something like that.
Yeah, no, those are key points.
We did look at this, and again, we want to be careful about this. 690 direct jobs, just a lot of labor goes into this. Indirect jobs, the supply chain, again, keeping in mind that we moved many things into the direct side, 33 and 153 households in this area on the induced side. So that's the 876 breakdown. When we looked at operations and maintenance, again, from Isabella, we had good numbers and annual average over that period. And again, it's bumpy, as Albert said, there'll be ongoing maintenance and then there may be rebuilds. And the timing is based, Albert, correct me where I'm wrong, but it's based on who the equipment that's put into the wind farm is at that moment. Essentially, though, output, or what we might call sales, almost $112 million over that 30-year event horizon. The value added, less important to most people, but we economists like it. But personal income, so income to residents of the county increased by about $54 million over that 30-year total, but for this wind project going in play.
Yeah, in those numbers, Jim, when we started running the model, were a nice eye opener for us, because it's easier for us to make some, just again, back on napkin time math. We're not seeing the full impacts that the REMI model is able to capture here. So that was a nice eye opener for us.
So this was really interesting, and so again, not thinking about this as windfall dollars, but spending, but keeping in mind this is a relatively rural county, so there was a lot of leakage out of the county to spend. So there wasn't necessarily every dealership, every appliance, and everything else that was purchased. And the nice thing about REMI is, you do get trade flows back and forth. And something that we saw earlier is it's important to think on a project this big about including data for the rest of the U.S., because there is a lot of cross-border types of things, and economics don't necessarily know political boundaries. But from this, there were an additional 12 jobs added on an average each year, 10.6 in the public sector, or in the private sector. My apologies. Increased sales in the county of about $85.8 million over the period. personal income. And this got a little bit weird, and we ended up talking a lot about this because output was 85 million, value added was 50 million, but personal income was 177 million. And it kind of usually goes, personal income is a subset of value added, which is a subset of output. But the reality is there was a lot of wealth transferred to families, and REMI put some into savings, but some into expenditures, but many of those dollars were exported out. But $85 million, so about half of the dollars were kept in the county for total earnings. And so this is, again, in a fairly rural place, beautiful, in great place to live. But, the local supply chain couldn't support the expenditures of all of those dollars over the 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this slide is interesting because we have a lot of fact-based data that we're able to put into the model. The results are one thing, but so we can talk about what the REMI model shows us. But it's nice that we can actually back that up with other real-world examples and/or have our the results of our REMI study actually verify what others are seeing out there in the field. So Dr. Sarah Mills is a PhD researcher at the University of Michigan. And for several years, she's actually been looking at her PhD, I believe, was in farmland preservation, and specifically looking at the question of whether or not wind energy or renewable energy is beneficial to or adverse to the idea of farmland preservation. So she spent a good bit of time conducting surveys with farmers and landowners throughout the state of Michigan, asking them, based on their experience, as they have participated in a wind farm, or if they don't participate in the wind farm, other operating farms throughout the state, what has their real life experience been? So she started asking questions about how would these rent payments been beneficial to you or your family, and her results show that that the money flowing from a wind farm into a community is circulated back into that community through the form of investment. She's found that farmers are much more likely to invest larger amounts of money in new equipment or maintaining the farm, whether it be putting up new barns or fixing homes or roofs, or buying additional property. And people who are involved in a wind project, who have revenue coming in to their family from a wind project, are far more likely to believe that their land will be farmed in the future. So that's the kind of that transition. The question about what's your plan to transition the farm? Can you keep the farm in the family? And will your future generations be able to continue farming the ground? That's a big question in rural America, especially with multi-generation family farms. And the answer, by and large, is yes. Folks who are participants in the wind project, who may have wind turbines on their property, and or who have revenue coming in from the wind farm in some way, shape, or form, are much likely to have a succession plan in place, so that their farm will continue to be farmed into the future. And so those are some interesting data points from Dr. Mills's research that has been looked at a national level, and I think it's all verified by some of the results we saw in the REMI study. So, of course, you can see Dr. Mills's research if you'd like to explore more through her faculty page at the University of Michigan. But Dr. Sarah Mills, back to you, Jim.
So in looking at, and Albert shared with you earlier, the distribution of townships and the state government and local special districts, libraries, sheriffs, and other things, created a total employment of about 20 jobs on an annual basis, private employment of about 10 jobs. So because this was so much in the government sector, and keeping in mind that REMI and others treat public sector K through 12, higher education and others within that public administration, NAICS codes in the 90s. They changed the outputs in the essentially from the public sector of about 123, almost 124 million dollars over the 30 years. The value added was 77 million, but personal income changed due to tax payments based on real personal property, both industrial and utility, added to the county, to local governments, local units of government, personal income of about $68 million. And so again, keeping in mind this is but for the project, this sort of support for the local governments would not have occurred. So really, in looking at the summary of this, year one, and we want to be careful, you know, you can't add jobs across time. Jobs are temporal, and so we don't do that in this case, but total employment in year one condensed down from probably an 18-month life cycle, about 876 total jobs. If you look at all the effects over the 30-year event horizon from operations and maintenance, payments to families, and payments to governments, about 48 jobs, 35 in the private sector. Change the output in the county or sales of about $321 million, and almost $300 million additional income through both direct, indirect, or through not both, but through direct, indirect, and induced events around this. So added $300 million, but for the activities of Apex, the developers, and their client in this end. So I think the next slide is. So our summary slide, we used data from Albert and his team that was evidence-based from recent evidence. So we weren't necessarily basing estimates off estimates. It was a contiguous or nearby county. The data supplied did not necessarily bias the results, either in a positive or negative direction. They didn't inflate numbers so we would get better outcomes. We don't do that sort of thing. We use the state-of-the-art at the time model, and it's best for creating economic estimates over a long event horizon, because we could build those 30-year models in REMI, and that was really much easier than JEDI or Implant or RIMS or anything else. Keeping in mind this is a but-for investment in the wind farm, none of this activity was likely to occur. There weren't any new mega projects bringing 6,000 jobs to the county or anything like that. If there were, they would have required incentives. The impacts over the event horizon are about on output or sales, about $454 million, value added $265 million. And personal income total over the 31-year period, just under $350 million, but for that. If you want to see this, the final report is on the Upjohn website, easily found. And I think the next slide is about us, isn't it?
Yeah, it's some quick closing contact information.
Feel free to contact us with any questions. And Brian, I guess we'll turn it back to you. And thanks for taking the time to listen.
Yeah, thanks for the great presentation, Albert and Jim. And thank you to all who attended. Our recording of this webinar will be available shortly on our website and will be posted. And you'll also be able to find a copy of these slides. You can find the links for everything and the emails and everything if you want to refer back to those. So we'll now get into some of the questions that we received. And the first one is this. At the beginning of the presentation, you estimated that 400 families will be involved in the project. How will the 400 families be involved? Like, just describe that.
Yeah, so the 400 families was approximately the number of families that we had signed up in participating in the Isabella project. Again, comparable size, and so we're able to kind of extrapolate and make some assumptions based on landowner participation. But the way that works, and so when we go out to a community to develop a project, wind, solar, what have you, we don't have eminent domain rights. Frankly, we don't want eminent domain rights. We're out here trying to work in good faith with the community. And so individual families or landowners, whether they're farmers or not a farmer, are able to participate and sign a wind easement or a lease agreement. And so it's kind of a contractual obligation on our end to uphold the commitments that we make in that easement or in that lease. And then anyone who owns any amount of property within our project footprint, and this is kind of an Apex, this is the way that Apex chooses to do business, but we'll identify kind of an area of interest. So we'll just draw like a rough circle in a region that we think is suitable for a wind project. Anyone who owns then at the end of the day any amount of property, be it a single acre in a house or a 1,200 acre farm. They're all eligible to participate and sign up. Again, by signing up or participating, we're signing actual wind agreements or easements or leases with those families, and then that kind of lays out the terms under which they would get paid. And we oftentimes find, especially in this project, we often find that we include some favored nations language, which guarantees that we're going to strike the same deal with everybody from a financial standpoint in that project footprint. So we don't twist arms. We try to offer a fair deal, but that's kind of where we come from. And so then it's on the signed acreage or the private land that people have chosen to sign into the project. It's on that signed acreage that we would actually go and build the project. So
great. Okay. The next question is there a case study of the project describing the ownership and financial structure of the project and its genesis from the conceptual stage?
Well, the project is still in development right now, so we don't have a case study per se, but I'd be happy to maybe have a follow-up conversation with anyone who's interested about our methodologies or the Isabella Wind project or the Montcalm project, etc. So no case study yet, but the Isabella project, I can say it's all public record. But the Isabella Wind project that we use as our base model, again, it's operational today. We developed that. We oversaw the construction. So Apex was directly involved in overseeing the construction. And then once that project was once construction had been completed and we're able to check all the boxes, we essentially turned it over and we sold it to DTE, who is one of the two incumbent or large utilities in the state of Michigan. So they own and operate it today. That's now a DTE project, but it's one that I know we're pretty proud of, and that I know DTE is proud of as well. So, but if there's follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out, touch base.
All right, and then one more came in. So, how are the lease payments structured? Are there fixed payments or somehow tied to project revenues?
So this would be another. This is that question can be answered a couple different ways based on who the developer may be, but the way that we structure our payments, they are fixed payments. It's not really necessarily tied to production or how much power is generated over the course of a year. There are leasing models or lease structures that would incorporate that, or maybe would put more emphasis on payments associated with annual energy production. But we find that it's easier to communicate with the landowners. It's also easier for participants and or communities to be able to anticipate what the actual financial benefit would be to them if we just have a kind of a guaranteed locked-in rate that's made clear on the front end. So it kind of takes out some of the guessing game. I will say certain states have, when we start looking at the taxation piece, which is a huge piece of the economic benefit of this project, is the long-term ongoing tax revenue that will be generated for the community, for that host community. Michigan is based on the actual cash value of the turbine. So how much does this project cost to build and operate? Michigan's tax structure is really based on the cash value of this equipment or of the infrastructure that is then located in any given jurisdiction. The state of Minnesota, however, has a different taxation structure, which is it's kind of a thing just across the board. Each state's going to have slight differences in their taxation models. The state of Minnesota does have a production tax, and so based on rather than the cash value of the infrastructure, the state of Minnesota will calculate tax revenues that should be paid to any given host community based on how much power is produced over the course of a given year. That's not the case in Michigan, but it is the case in some other states. So again, in Michigan, we have a kind of a guaranteed base annual payment that people would receive for their acreage or for participation in the project area.
Okay. And then Another one that just came in. Did you estimate amenity benefits of GHG reductions? How are benefits from reduced costs of backup spinning capacity distributed?
Yeah, well, I guess it may have you repeat part of the question, but in terms of looking at greenhouse gas or emission reductions as a result of this project, yeah, we have some of those numbers. I don't have those right off the top of my head, but that's a big piece of. I mean, I'll tell you, it's a big motivator for me doing the work that I do, and for us as a company, as a mission-driven company. I was pretty intent on helping provide solutions to whatever the future of the energy grid looks like. There's significant changes that are underway, and as we build more of these projects, obviously that reduces the need for other traditional fossil fuel-based energy resources. So, if we can lessen our dependence on the need for fossil fuels and produce more energy from wind, solar, or other renewable resources, yeah, we've calculated what those estimates may be from a GHG reduction standpoint. And yeah, I'm sorry I don't have those with me, but those numbers are pretty significant.
Just a brief comment on maybe the state of Michigan compared to anywhere else. MISO came out, the grid operator, this year, and at one point on the hottest day, we were 6 gigawatts short. So at this point, I'm not sure that Albert and all of his efforts are necessarily replacement at this point, but I think additive to deal with the necessary increase in demand. In fact, they're looking at how to keep one of our nukes online because of the deficiencies. And in all honesty, to give Albert props, he's hung in there. The NIMBYs are fairly difficult in many cases in trying to get this stuff done. And so, I know in our time we've talked about extending the, going into the dirt. And so, not only maybe are we trying to reduce greenhouse gases, but we're also trying to keep the grid enhanced so we can stay warm this winter too.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jim. I was talking with don't tell anybody who asked, but I can talk all day long about the environmental benefits, the GHG reductions, all that. It's all significantly important. But at the end of the day, the reality of this is, we are shutting down coal plants, not Apex per se, but coal plants are shutting down. A lot of this is very much market driven. Those projects or those plants were built, say, sometimes 50 plus years ago, with an estimated life cycle of, maybe a 50-year operational life. Well, if you build something in the 1940s and we're still using it today in 2022, we're well beyond that 50-year operational life. And what we see is that it's often more economical to build a brand new wind farm, to go through all the development work and to put this type of investment into a new wind farm. It's cheaper for us to do that than it is to continue operating a lot of the existing coal plants that are on the market here today. And so, wind isn't the only answer. Solar is not the only answer. Like all things, you want to have a diversified portfolio. But the more renewable resources we can have on the grid, the better. It's going to make us more energy independent. Just from a fact-based matter, we become more energy independent when we rely on the wind and solar, or the wind and sun. But as these projects or as coal plants are shutting down in Michigan and across the state, we also need to be thinking about what this transition is going to look like. And so part of my message to communities is, I get, things change can be tough at times, but we need to be thinking about the bigger picture. What are we going to do? We need to find some solutions, and this is a solution that is a win-win, really, for frankly everybody. So we build these projects, and the data we saw or the results, I guess, that we saw from the REMI model really show that this is a no-brainer, a good thing for everyone in this community, with the amount of resources that will flow back into the community to help out everybody, even if you're not signed up into the wind project. So kids in schools, or fixing roads, or fixing other needs that rural communities have, these projects go a long way to lighten the load for the rest of the community.
Okay, and then the second half of that question was, how are benefits from reduced costs of backup spinning capacity distributed?
Well, I guess that would depend in part on the grid operator side to figure out kind of where those specific needs are and what that associated cost might be. But yeah, I think Jim's point kind of, unless I'm misunderstanding the question, Jim's point strikes a nerve with me. There's demand on the grid today. We don't have enough operating assets, be it solar or traditional, fossil fuel based resources to sometimes meet those needs. And so I feel like the amount of work that's got to go into building more and more projects is kind of alarming at times when you think about it. So I'm not sure that I actually fully understand the question or that I'm the best person to talk to. But I would say, Brian, maybe if you don't mind, send me that. Let me actually get the questioner a more comprehensive response to that. I don't want to just kind of come out here and say something that doesn't actually address the question itself.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that was all. Yeah.
Happy to follow up.
Yep. So that was all the questions we had. So thank you very much to Albert and Jim for presenting. It was very informative. If you have any questions for them, their emails are on the screen. Feel free to reach out. If you have any questions about REMI and the work we do, you can reach out to info@remi.com and we'll make sure to reach out to you as soon as possible. And yeah, thank you for everybody for joining, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, Brian, thank you.
Thank you.